Let's dive right in, shall we? We're tackling one of the most powerful and maybe one of the most misunderstood images in the entire Bible, the first horseman of the apocalypse. Is he a figure of doom and destruction, or is there something else going on entirely? Today, we're going to peel back the layers of myth and see what the scripture actually reveals about this mysterious spiritual conqueror. The language here is just wow. A white horse, a bow, a crown, and this relentless mission to conquer. You know, the single verse has sparked endless debate for centuries. But what if the key to unlocking its real meaning isn't just in this one book, but woven throughout the entire story of the Bible? So, to figure this out, we're going to break it down into 5 key pieces. We'll look at the horse, we'll identify the rider, we'll analyze his weapon and that crown he was given, and finally, we'll try to understand his real mission. By looking at each symbol one by one, we're going to build a really clear picture of who this rider truly is. Okay, first things first, we have to get our heads around the language of Revelation. This isn't a history book describing some literal warrior on a horse. Nope, it's a vision, and it is packed with deep spiritual symbolism. To really get this, we have to kind of shift our perspective from the physical to the spiritual. The prophet Isaiah gives us the perfect key for this. He contrasts human armies with God's power by saying, their horses are flesh and not spirit. See? So in a divine vision like this one, a horse isn't just an animal, it's a spiritual force. And a white horse? Well, that points directly to purity, righteousness, and a victorious mission. So if the horse represents a pure spiritual force on a mission, that leads us to the big question, right? Who is the rider? Well, the best clues aren't found by looking outside the text, but by going deeper within it, to another portrait of a rider on a white horse, right here in the same book. And check this out, this side-by-side comparison is just so revealing. On the left, you've got our mystery rider from chapter 6, and on the right, an undisputed depiction of Jesus from chapter 19. The parallels are just undeniable. Both are on a white horse, both are crowned, and both are on a mission of righteous conquest. The second rider, who is explicitly called faithful and true, basically confirms the identity of the first. The rider is Jesus Christ. And this identity lines up perfectly with prophecies from the Old Testament. Psalm 45 describes a king riding out in majesty for the cause of truth, humility, and righteousness. This is not a conqueror who comes to destroy people. I mean, after all, John 3:16 tells us God's whole motivation is love for the world. No, this is a spiritual king, and his war is against the forces of darkness, not against us. Okay, on to the next clue, the bow. Now this detail, this is one of the most fascinating and revealing parts of the whole image. It tells us everything we need to know about the kind of conquest we're talking about. Now here's the key. Get this. The rider has a bow, but did you notice what's missing? There's no mention of arrows. Think about that for a second. Why would a conqueror ride into battle without any ammunition? It's because this isn't a physical war. This is a symbolic weapon, and its power comes from something else entirely. The Old Testament prophet Habakkuk gives us a direct connection. He literally writes that God's bow is his word. This tells us the weapon our rider is carrying is the sharp, piercing power of divine truth. And we see another prophetic link in the book of Kings. The prophet Elisha tells a king to shoot an arrow, and he calls it the arrow of the Lord's deliverance. This whole act symbolizes a victory that's started and won by God's power, not by human strength. So when you put it all together, the bow isn't a weapon of destruction. Throughout the Old Testament, it's a symbol of God's strength, the truth of his word, spiritual victory, and ultimately the peace he brings through his covenant. The rider's weapon is truth itself. All right, let's move on to the crown, and you'll see how this all builds. A crown was given unto him. This isn't just a symbol of royalty, it's a prize. It signifies a victory that has already been won. And to really understand how important that is, we have to remember the other crown he wore. First, he wore this, a crown of thorns. It was a symbol of mockery, of pain, of unimaginable suffering during his crucifixion. This was the crown that humanity gave him. But through that very act of suffering, he earned a completely different crown. The crown of victory becomes a crown of glory that fadeth not away. I mean, what an incredible transformation. It goes from the symbol of the deepest humiliation to the symbol of the ultimate eternal victory. So this brings us to the final part of the verse, the mission. He went forth, conquering and to conquer. If his weapon is truth and his crown is for a victory won through suffering, then what does this conquest actually look like? Let's be really clear here. This conquest is 100% spiritual. It means winning the victory over the true enemies of humanity, sin, death, and all the spiritual forces of darkness. Like the Apostle Paul said later, this is not a war against flesh and blood. And the Bible is super specific about what is being defeated. Paul writes in Colossians that Jesus triumphed over all spiritual principalities and powers on the cross. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus himself says, "I have overcome the world." This victory isn't about domination, it's about overcoming evil with good. So the writer's mission isn't destruction at all, it's deliverance. He isn't conquering nations with brute force, he's conquering human hearts with the unstoppable power of truth and grace. And this is where a 2,000-year-old text becomes incredibly personal. If Jesus is the one leading this spiritual charge, what's our role in all this? Well, the imagery in Revelation seems to suggest that we're invited to join him. Think about this fascinating, symbolic picture from later in Revelation. John sees these beings that look like horses ready for battle, but they have the faces of men. Many scholars see this as a picture of the church, of believers empowered by the Spirit, ready to join Jesus in his mission of spiritual conquest. And that leaves us with a final, really powerful thought to chew on. The rider on the white horse isn't some terrifying figure of destruction. He's a victorious king, inviting us to join his mission of deliverance. So the ultimate question this ancient text asks of us today is this: if his war is spiritual, fought with truth, righteousness, and love, what does it truly mean to join his cavalry?